All right, welcome in. This is Trauma Bonding. My name is Matt. This is my wife, Taylor. Right off the top, I just want to say this is a place that we hope to create where people who have gone through tragedies, trauma, whatever experiences in life that have been tough, and how they have gotten through them. And I think both are equally important. I think we both agree on that. But as you'll learn, I think something that we have found that has helped us get through things in our life um, has been the fact that we have heard from other people in similar situations with things going on in their life and have found it to be a way that helps us heal. And so we want to create this space where we can help other people heal through sharing their story to help others. I don't know. Do you agree there? Or
Yeah, I think like once you open that door and say, hey, this is what I'm struggling with, or this is what I've experienced, and that kind of gives the permission for someone else to do the same. And so we've seen that happen over and over again with different situations in our life, and we figured out it's time to do it a little bit bigger.
yep. So all cards on the table. This is, I think it is May 7th. This is our third night in a row doing this, and we've learned a couple things from the previous two nights. What I am going to say is this is not going to be perfect. It's not going to be a perfect representation of everything, every little detail that we have gone through, all the struggles that we have gone through. Um, this is my trauma is spread out over the last 9 years, and so we won't get into every little thing. But right off the top, we will give you a warning if this is something that triggers you. But there will be a point where we talk about suicide, and I just wanted to get that out ahead of time, let people know. And I'd say the second thing, at least for me, and I'll let you kind of say what you want to say before we get into it. But for me, to preface this before time, we are truly grateful to have, for the most part, this all behind us. We are in a much better place now than we were even 6 months ago, 3 months ago. Um, we are going to make light of some things. We'll probably joke about some things that it no way is diminishing the fact that like we have gone through some really hard stuff together, and I wouldn't be here without her. So if you want to say anything before we get going, we can kind of get into it. But
Yeah, and that's kind of like how a relationship is anyway. We are lighthearted and throw jokes around. And so maybe you'll hear that in this, and that's just us trying to normalize the conversation about suicide, about depression, about anxiety, about things that you'll experience. Because, like we said, once you normalize it, someone else can too. So, I think where we get started is learning um, about your journey to being a firefighter and what got you started in being a professional firefighter.
all right, to preface this, I don't want to spend all this time on my childhood, but I was raised in a house where I had two very good parents. No childhood trauma, anything of the such. I saw my parents be active in the community from a young age. My dad spent 20 plus years on the school board. My mom was very active in the community, and from a young age, I wanted to give back to others that had helped raise me, and so in a sense, the community that raised me, I wanted to be a part of people that helped provide a service to the community that raised me. And I don't know if you want to tell your joke, but I don't want to steal your thunder.
So Matt always talks about like how it was like ingrained to give back
Mm-hmm.
growing up, right? And I like to say that it was so ingrained that it's in your family dinner time prayer. You say, help everyone, take care of everyone. And that
Mm-hmm.
is, I mean, how can you not be a civil servant
Right.
after hearing those
Right.
words every single night of
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
pre adult life?
And my mom was a teacher, so coming out of high school, I had very influential PE teachers. I'm gonna try not to clap or snap my fingers or whatever. I'm a very fidgety person. I'll try not to play with my hair. It drives my wife nuts. So I'm gonna try to avoid that. But my mom was a teacher, and so I had positive teacher influences on me, and that mostly was in PE. And so I left high school and went to the local college here to be a PE teacher. And while I was doing that, I started volunteering with the fire department here in our town, and you know enjoyed it. Got to the point where I was persuaded to take the fire test for Omaha, and I did very well. I know I had a lot of help getting hired, and I'm truly thankful for that stuff. But I tested very well and ended up getting hired, and started my career with the Omaha Fire Department in February of 2013. And I don't know. You want to talk about, like, we were young kids at the time. I was 22 when I got hired. Tayler was still in college when we first moved in together. We've been high school sweethearts. We have been through literally everything. I think it's 16 years.
Probably.
It's crazy. Our relationship is now a teenager who can drive. But we've been together through a lot, and I think, like most young people, like, that, I had a really good paying job, and we came into money, and things were great, and things were good, and it's hard to tell, when things start getting out of hand. But I'd say for me, that all kind of changed in May of 2015. I don't know if you want to talk anything
Yeah.
about that before,
Yeah, go
but
ahead.
so I at that point I had kind of found a home in North Omaha there, in Battalion 2, and worked with a bunch of people that I really enjoyed being around. Was motivated to do a good job, and wanted to impress these people that I kind of idolized, and so I enjoyed it there. And on May 20th, I was at Station 22, and we got called out for a shooting, and didn't really get any information in route other than a shooting. And probably took us 4 or 5 minutes to get there, and we show up on scene, and it was chaos. And
And shootings weren't abnormal
right,
for this
right,
part of
yep.
town.
It wasn't my first shooting. I'd done shootings before. Wasn't really thinking of anything much, when we were going there, and get out of the engine, and the guy on back was a paramedic, and we get led over to a person and start working. And for those of you that don't know, it was an officer involved shooting. We found that out later. The officer that was shot was Kerry Roscoe, and while my story is just a small part of that, the tragedy that happened that day affected a whole community, a family, everything. And so um, it was very hard. We ended up taking care of Kerry's shooter, and he was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at the hospital. But we didn't find that out till later. Again, we didn't know what was going on, and after we got there and everything kind of settled down, we pieced together what had happened. And um, that day, things just changed. I was really struggling with it from the aspect of, I had helped try to rescue a cop killer, and it was very tough. And Taylor and I are mutual friends and close friends with a family that lost a dad and a husband and a son, from a police officer involved shooting, and it hit close to home. And so, as soon as that day, I had my battalion chief was informed. The person who was in charge of peer support, she was informed. My PSS was informed, and I don't know. Things just started getting tough from that point on.
And before,
Yeah, sorry.
immediately, no, it's okay. Immediately, the fire department took steps, I would say, if you can give them that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was
Took
documented, and
took
they took
steps
steps. I
to.
went to EAP twice. It was very ineffective. The guy just told me to go to the bar, and I should say, I what we're about to talk about and the people we're about to talk about, we won't name names. We're not looking to call out anybody. This is just a story to just tell, things from our perspective. And this isn't us trying to seek change or belittle people, but just call attention to, the way things were for us and how tough it was. So, right.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so, so that happens. Carrie's call happens, and like I said, we were young at the time. That happened in May, and in August we got married. And so life continued on, despite this very traumatic event. And I continued to work, and I had other triggering calls that I went on after that, that started to affect me, and things started to kind of compound. And one of the ways that I really started to cope with everything that had been going on was to start drinking. And um, again, we were young, we were just married. Things started innocently enough, I would say, and it slowly became a problem to the point where I started hiding drinking from Tayler during the day. I was drinking as soon as I got off work in the morning, um, relying on it to one get me through the day, because my depression had started to occur. And at the time, we didn't really. This was before my diagnosis, but um, things just kind of started to get worse. And I started, getting angry while drinking and blacking out while drinking and not knowing what happened. And things kind of culminated from there. But I also, started to use it to help me sleep because I started getting these vivid nightmares. Um, my nightmares are like real life to me. I smell the blood from the victims. I I see and feel the grass. I feel the rocks crumbling beneath my feet as I run down the street. I feel everything. And so to mask that, I just started drinking more and more. And I don't know. You can talk about how big of a struggle that was because like not only did it affect me, but it also started to affect Taylor. So
Yeah. So if I can back up a little bit,
yeah,
if that's
yeah,
okay, this all came as kind of like a surprise to me, I guess, because backing way up to May 20th, I remember watching the news like reports of the shooting and seeing this firefighter riding on a stretcher, straddling someone giving CPR, which ended up being Matt. I didn't know it at the time, but I was like, wow, like I know that my husband's on the scene. This is kind of cool. I remember thinking that, like, I'm going to be a fire wife. This is what we have been talking about. We were so excited to start raising our children around the fire department and, you know, just being a part of a fire family. And so looking back, I was like very naive about how that
well,
would
yeah,
affect you. And like, I
yeah.
guess like we both were,
We
but
both
like,
were. I mean, like,
what do you
yeah.
expect? And so when things started to like happen, I don't think I was aware. And you'll kind of see that as like a thing, I guess, for me. Like, at least I see it as a pattern for me. I just don't
Well,
see how bad things are in the
well, and
moment.
I tend to hide things. I don't show things. Me talking about this stuff is nothing new, but like at the time, like I hid things very well. I've told Taylor stories now that she had no idea about,
Yeah.
and it's not like I was getting sloppy drunk because, like I'll say, I don't know if you have anything else to say, but
Mm-mm.
um, I became an alcoholic, and not in the sense that I was getting sloppy, blackout drunk every night, but I became dependent or addicted on alcohol taking an edge off of me. And that all kind of culminated in March of 2018. And so most firemen work two jobs, and I was working my day off job and got a concussion. I think it was nine concussion number 8 or 9. Um, didn't tell anybody I was working with. It was March Madness, and we were going to the bar right after we got done with this job, and so I didn't want to tell anybody. And went to the bar, got drunk, came home, took my truck out to the field behind our house, spun a bunch of cookies,
Lied about drinking to his wife.
lied about drinking, and and the concussion to my wife. Took my wife out in the truck, blew my turbo up, did a lot of damage to my truck, and then went to work the next morning because I didn't remember doing any of it. And when I went to work the next morning, I lasted about 5 minutes, and they took me to the hospital. And I was diagnosed with a severe concussion, and everything kind of just. I'll talk about it a little bit more, but like I've always had this like feeling of like this is the lowest point in my life. It can't get any worse than this. And I remember going to the hospital with the guys at the station and just feeling like, dude, this is an all time low. And then 2 days later, we were doing a follow up with a doctor at a clinic, and he kind of asked about everything, asked about my drinking.
He also asked about, oh, sorry to
Go ahead,
interrupt
go ahead.
you, but he also asked about a lot of other things, or he asked about other things that Matt shared that I had no idea that he was struggling with. Like, I remember the doctor actually saying,
Yeah.
have you ever thought about killing yourself or maybe harming
Right.
yourself is what he said. And Matt said yes. And the doctor then took it a step further. Have you ever thought about taking your own life? And Matt said yes. And I'm like, oh, we're here.
Right.
Like, all right, that's something that I've never heard before.
Well, and to be fair, like in the early days, like it wasn't like drawn out suicidal thoughts. It
Right.
was quick hitting. Like
It was like this. It was the
your
signs
life.
it was the signs of depression,
Right.
is what he was screening you
Right.
for.
It would be something like like your life is meaningless. Innocent
Yeah.
stuff that.
Yeah.
At the time, like I thought everybody dealt with. Like I thought everybody had fucked up thoughts, and so when he diagnosed me with, he ended up diagnosing me with PTSD, depression, and anxiety, and I know I'll speak for myself, but it was a big shock. In academy, they talked about like you're going to see some fucked up stuff, and I'm not blaming anybody, but one of the things that they said is talk about it to the guys that you went on the college with, go get a beer, and that's kind of the mentality that I had with this stuff is like I didn't not talk about things that were bothering me, but the alcohol just became a problem, and so I don't know.
Well, and it was hard to see that the alcohol
Right.
was a problem because we were young. Like, we were newly married. We were living in a house by ourselves. We had friends who were young, and we were dinkers. We were double income,
Right.
no kid, having fun, living our best lives. And so it was easy to like give the excuse of drinking too much
Right.
on, well, we just had a weekend with our friends, or like
Right.
you were playing softball on the weeknight, or
Right. It just became ingrained in
Mhm.
like in everyday culture. But
Mhm.
the diagnosis was like a real eye opener because, like I said, in academy they talk about that, and growing up, like at least for me, like I thought PTSD was just something that like military people got. I didn't ever like contemplate the fact that like I could get it working as a fireman. And along with the diagnosis, Taylor and I had a discussion. And she said something along the lines around the same time of, you need to get this under control or like this is not going to work out. And, I cried to myself a little bit, got alcohol under control fairly quickly after that point. I still had mess ups, but I started at that point doing like a limit. I would limit myself to 3 drinks, try to limit how many times a week I drank, but like no more than 3 drinks. And it worked good initially. And, you know, things, I started seeing a therapist right after that. And, the doctor at the time had wanted to start prescribing medication, but I didn't want to take medication at that point. I wanted to prove that I could do it by myself and work through my stuff by myself. So, like I said, we got a therapist and started working with her closely. And I don't know, by July of 2019, things had not gotten better to the point where in June, we lost a coworker to suicide, and I struggle every May um, with Carrie's anniversary, and so May was happening, and it was the anniversary, and I was depressed and in a bad place, and then we lost a coworker, a couple weeks later, and it hit really close to home because that's when I was starting to like truly have more intense suicidal ideation. And so, like I said, by July, my team um, decided it was best for me to go to the Center of Excellence in Maryland, right? And I don't. You want to say anything about that, or
Yeah, and so when he says that like this suicidal ideation stuff started to take off, I knew nothing. Um, that was I remember like at the time I was seeing the therapist that Matt sees now for other reasons, and so I was talking about, and she was a therapist that saw firefighters for the most part, first
first responders?
responders.
Yeah.
And so I was talking to her about him, and she convinced me to convince him to bring him in because she said that he was showing signs that were a little scary. And so something broke, like not physically, but like in within his person.
Aura. I don't know how to explain it. Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
broke, and that break was the cause of I know we are. That break was the cause of getting Matt in the door of therapy and then starting to, set things in place for him to go to this um, Center of Excellence.
Yeah. And so I ended up at the Center of Excellence. It's a career firefighter immersive rehab facility that specializes in not only substance abuse but mental health as well. And so I spent 30 days there. I learned a lot about myself and was able to get things rolling. I say that the two most important things that I got from that experience was one the friendships that I made with the people that were there. Like the title of this says, trauma bonding. I have this bond with five guys from across the country that we still talk, a couple times a month, and we check in on each other and hold each other accountable, and that was very big for me. But it also kick-started the process of taking meds because when you went there, you had to start medication. Um, and so when I left, I just started medication, and we had set up a plan that I wanted to be 100% before I went back to the job because at this point, I just wanted to get back to work. I wanted to continue to do the job that I loved, that I was good at, that I had worked to get to. And so we took a couple months because medication was very tough at first.
Well, I think even before you went back to work, you had switched
Oh,
at least once.
Two or three times before I went back to work, or two or three, because I started taking three medications and we switched a couple of them around, and it was challenging. Like plug your ears, parents. I had a very low sex drive, and to begin with, and then I started taking medicine, and I had no sex drive, and it was very difficult because at this time Taylor and I, started to want to start our family. And so we're going through all of this stuff and trying to get pregnant and dealing with PTSD and all this stuff. And finally, in February, got to a good place where I felt good with my medication, felt good mentally, was prepared to go back to work, went back to work. At this point, I had a home. I loved the people that I was working with. I'm not going to name any names in this podcast, but I will name one. Shout out Joe. He's the GOAT. I felt really good about going back. And that was in February. And like I said, I don't do good with anniversaries. And May rolled around and things just kind of started spiraling again from there. Drinking picked up again. Suicide came back. My nightmares were returning. And everything just kind of went back to the way it was before. And
I would say like it might have been a little worse, like as far as like the night terrors go, because he says nightmares, but it's terrors. Like,
Well, you can. I mean, if you want to tell them, tell them.
well, I don't think it really escalated until like you had gone back to work and then
Yeah.
had taken another break, because up until then I think it was just dreams,
Right.
right? Like maybe some flailing, maybe some
Sweating
talking,
through sheets, a lot
right?
of sheet sweating, but yeah.
Which still happens.
Oh yeah. No. Yeah.
But now, so what, May through you're in May, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. Then or February through May, the flailing, the kicking, giving a sternal rub to me in the middle of the night, all while dreaming and thinking that, like, again, he's in these like immersive dreams. Me having to wake him up because I can sense that his breathing's off, meaning that he's in a night terror, which is like very helpful to be able to like sense and see, but it was detrimental
Right.
to your health at that point. And I also do want to I want to give a little bit of credit to the fire department at this time, because up until then they were patient with you, right?
Yeah.
Like they
Oh
were
yeah.
patient with you to take time off to go to the Center of Excellence. They were patient with you to wait until February when you got back home in August.
To be fair, I was a lot at that time. Anytime you're injured on duty, you have a year to come
Right,
back,
but we'll
so,
talk about then how
yeah.
like that patience
Right.
ran thin.
Yeah. So, and I don't know. With everything that happened, it just became clear that this wasn't going to work out for me, and so I left in August, and it took until October. But on a Tuesday in October, Taylor and I sat down and we talked to my union people, my fire department people, my medical team, everybody, and we kind of just all came to the same conclusion that like it was time to move on from this, and it wasn't going to be successful. And again, like that was my new low. Like I had worked, like this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to give back to my community, and I loved being a badass, right? Like firemen are badass. They get to run into burning buildings and jump on roofs when they're on fire and like do fun shit. And yeah, there's a lot of shit that sucks with it, and there's a lot of like bad things, but like leaving the job wasn't just leaving the job to me. It wasn't like leaving McDonald's or Burger King. Like it was a family that I was leaving. It was a family that like I had grown accustomed to and used to having, and it was very tough. And so like that was a low point. And then 2 days later, we find out after a year and some change that we were finally pregnant, and it's just like this balance of life. And so all these things are going on, and we finally decide to retire. And so that's the fire side of this PTSD story, and we'll switch over here real quick to the rest of the story. But again, before we start, I think it's important to say we understand the process. We understand that we elected to go through this, that we knowingly knew what we were getting into. I think what is also fair to say is that it is a shitty system. It is not designed to help people that actually need help. And I get that there are people out there that fake injuries, that fake diagnoses, that fake whatever. And so I get why the system is there, right? We understand that.
Yeah.
But for people who are actually struggling, the system is failed. And again, not naming names and not trying to call out anybody, but with that being said, I think
Well, and I think you're referring to this system of, so
retiring.
Matt, right. So when Matt made the decision to leave the job, it was going to be leaving the job in a medical disability retirement.
Correct. Because at that point, I had been diagnosed with an IOD, which is an injury on duty.
And your doctor said that it was career ending.
Correct. And it had been paid for by the city, and they had agreed upon it. And so when I retired, there was one person prior to me that had tried to leave with a mental health disability, and I knew his story and kind of the process that he went through. So we thought it would be similar, and we knew because our lawyer and our union had said it might be a little tougher than that we might be in for a little more of a challenge than what the previous guy had gone through, but that if we went through it, we thought we could win. And so that kind of kickstarted this whole process where basically what happened is it's twofold. The city elected to send me to a doctor to get an IME, which is an independent medical evaluation. The city can send me to one, and my union can send it to one. And so what happened is the city sent me to a doctor, and I won't get into every detail because it's not that long. But we were told, these things typically take between 6 to 8 hours. Arrive early, have someone drive you there, have someone pick you up. Plan on it being a strenuous activity and getting grilled about everything. And so, we show up. We're half an hour early. I sign a sheet, and this was during COVID. This is like peak of COVID, so sign a sheet, write my name and the time. It's 7:35. I sit in the lobby, and I don't get called in until 8:20. And I'm under the assumption that I'm talking face to face with this person, and I get put in this tiny little room with a laptop and said, "Hey, it's COVID times. We're doing this over Zoom." And so, doctor whatever pops on, and without introducing himself, without saying hello or anything like that, he just goes, "Why are you here?"
We first asked why you were late.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, he asked first why I was late, and it threw me off because I was early and in the waiting room, and it anyway. His first legitimate question was, "Why are you here?" And it kind of threw me off because, like I said, like I was there for an IME, so I just politely say, I was here for an IME, and you're supposed to be performing that, and the city referred me here, and he goes, "No, I mean, what got you here? What situation put you in this office today that you need to retire?" And so basically, I think I spent 13 minutes just telling my story from everything that had happened up to that point. And he goes, "Okay, I think I have everything I need." The whole interview from start to finish was under 23 minutes. It's all on tape. It's all recorded. Seen it. Um, and it was nothing like we were prepared for. And so at that point, we kind of knew something was off because it should have taken 8 hours for this guy to do a complete whatever. But he wrote at least 1,200 pages in the report about me from 22 minutes. And his findings were basically, yes, I had PTSD, but if I saw him, then he would fix me enough to the point where I could go back to work.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, at the same time, the union then sent me to a doctor to get another one done. And that one was closer to what I thought it was going to be. It was about 5.5 hours long, again, all recorded. But this one was, a lot of in-depth questions. And his report came back and it said, he has PTSD, it's career ending, without a doubt, whatever. And so, for those people keeping score or sports fans at home, that's, a 1-1 tie. So in the event that happens, what happened next was the city and the union then selected a bunch of doctors, went back and forth, eliminating some, and then finalized on one. And so this is a doctor that was based in a state other than where we live. So we set up travel and went out there and did this last exam. And it comes back that, I do have PTSD. Yes, it is from the job, and yes, it is career ending. And so at that point, we were thinking things are good, and I think we're optimistic at this point.
Yeah.
So that was in August. At that point, we were waiting for the pension board, and to kind of, again, I said we weren't going to cover it all, but at this point, I'm just trying to work a second job, being told I can't, having a private investigator follow me. All this stuff is going on in the background that's causing our life to be stressful, and we can talk about that in another episode. But so life is continuing to just continue on while all this stuff is going on, and so my pension board hearing gets pushed back and pushed back, and finally, you know, in February of 22, I had just devolved to a state that was unrecognizable. My depression was bad. I was tired of not being able to work. I was tired of not being helpful around the house and having a bad attitude. And so I woke up on my dad's birthday in February, and um, I don't know. Do you want to share from your point of view,
Sure,
or
yeah.
yeah?
So we've mentioned like nightmares or night terrors. Usually when that happens and like Matt has a really bad night of sleep, he's getting better at it, but he doesn't say anything. And so like he
Yeah,
wakes up agitated or doesn't even like doesn't get out of bed.
getting out of bed and
Um,
stuff. Yeah,
yeah, and is agitated when he is finally up, and like any little tiny thing sets him off. And so that happened that morning, and um, I could just tell that it was a bad night, and so like trying to just like let him do his thing, he got um, worked up so much that he threatened to. I mean, you can tell this side of the story, and then
yeah.
I'll tell mine.
Uh, I I don't know how to explain it, but
Trigger warning.
yeah, trigger warning here. Um, having hindsight, it it felt like an outer body experience. I was trying to convey this message to Taylor that I needed help, and Taylor was trying to take care of our kid and trying to calm me down and try to like juggle all these things, and I needed help that like she couldn't provide, and I felt like she wasn't hearing me, so I just said like fuck this, nobody can hear me. I am done with this life. And in my head, I was just done with it. So I told Taylor, I was like, I'm going to go kill myself. I'll see you later. I shut off my location to my phone, head out, and at this point, I had a letter written to Taylor at one point that lasted about 5 minutes before I had regret and destroyed it and never talked about it. But at this point, I had thought through so many ways of like how I would kill myself, and luckily for me, like I was an avid gun collector, loved shooting and hunting, and luckily for me, for me, Jesus, our kids are so screwed. Taylor had the hindsight and wherewithal to take the guns out of our house. Um, and so thankfully, like I didn't have that quick, easy access to go get something because I believe that's important, right? Like if I had easy access to do it, I could have done it 100 times. But having to like get in my because my other plan, we live on a busy highway that the dump is right down the road from, and we have trash trucks running up and down it. So my other plan that I had come up with is I'm just going to go get in front of a semi, and so I leave. I head out to the highway. I wait for a semi. It doesn't come, and then I just start going to find one. Waited at an intersection for like 45 seconds, and I said, "Fuck this! I'm just gonna go find one." Um, all while this is going on, do you want to share what you're doing?
Yeah. So Matt's therapist has been a lifeline for us or me, I guess, since he started seeing her. And so in these times of like high need, I am in touch with her. And so I told her what was happening, and she suggested that I call 911. So I did, because 988 at the time wasn't a thing. Otherwise, I feel like this would have been a nicer experience. But so I did, and then an APB was put out, and
You talk about handcuffs are great. Um, and so an APB, not trying to joke, but an APB was put out, and we have a mutual friend that is a police officer, and he called me, and I had a couple phone calls, but then Taylor was trying to call me, my therapist was trying to
well,
call
and
me.
one of them, he answered the phone, and he was like, and maybe this was after the APB and before your friend called you, or before you picked up from your friend, whatever. And I remember him saying like, "What are you doing? I'm only going to O'Reilly's," which for the past few years I've been kicking myself because I'm like,
Right.
oh, he was like just like crying wolf, and he wasn't
Mhm.
actually going to do something dangerous up until we had this conversation maybe 2 months ago, and you were like, no, that was real. I was lying to you because I didn't want you to think I was actually going to do it.
Well, there's a lot of shame that comes with it,
Right.
right? I mean, like, you try to protect people and you try to, like,
But I think it's just like that awakening for me that,
yeah,
like, once again, like, oh, wow, something bigger is happening than I'm even aware of,
right,
that, like, it's time to start doing something about it.
right. And so,
He called you.
who called me?
The
No, I was getting there. Yeah.
Okay.
um, I turned around, came home. Seemed like half of the sheriff's department was at my house, but that again, we talk about low points. That was my low point. Being in handcuffs in the back of a cruiser, being on a. I burped, and she hates when I burp. Um,
I'm sure they do too.
yeah, I'm sorry for that.
Like
Be,
walking in on handcuffs to see your dad and your father-in-law standing there. Because I had called my dad
to come over and
to
help
help
with our
with
kid.
our,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was low like that. Like being in this mental health crisis where, and like I said, like I had the hindsight afterwards to be like, I came out of this like days where like it just felt like this frenzy in my mind, and when I came out of it, it was like my brain could breathe. I it's hard to explain, but so having those thoughts of like, man, I got put on a 24-hour hold in an emergency protective custody and was handcuffed, and that was low, and the work continued from there. You know, continued with medication adjustments and therapy and doctor's visits and all this stuff. And so, one, I'm very lucky that a semi didn't come by that day. Two, that we have people in our lives and things in place that prevented me from doing anything seriously stupid. And um, but I think the biggest lesson that I've learned from that is that I thought like that couldn't happen to me. I know people that have died by suicide. I've had um, two people that I know really close and love and cherish that have died by suicide, and it is something that I've never considered for myself. I've worked through a lot of feelings from them, but a lot of my feelings from that was just like how shitty it is that you leave the people behind to deal with that guilt. And for the first time, I think after that day, it was just like, yo, this is a reality. Like this is hard. And so do the work. Things continue to move on, and finally, we have my pension board meeting.
Mhm.
And
Which decides one part of this retirement
right,
process. So,
right,
like you said, it was a twofold. One is to see if you can receive a
a pension.
50% pension.
Yeah.
And then,
The other part is to get medical coverage.
mhm.
And they're tied in and loosely. Like if one goes one way, the other one's probably going the other way. And so the pension board. Do you want to talk about
You can go ahead.
the pension board? Is made up of people who receive pensions. It's made up of people that um, work in city government, and there's a fire representative and a police representative, and I've worked with the fire representative. I know that man. And so we go in front of them, and my lawyer gets up and says his thing, and then allows me to speak, and I get up there and cry my way through a whole bunch of shit because at this point, like life was real, and I was sad that I was still struggling. I was sad that I was leaving the fire department and losing my family in that regards, and so I got up there and cried through about 10 minutes of speech, and about 30 seconds later they said 07 in favor of denying this pension.
Mhm. Which, if you like backing up, the whole reason that they had you go through the IME process and get rulings from three different doctors was because the pension board doesn't know anything. They're not experts in the medical field.
Mm-hmm.
They are supposed to take influence from the IMEs.
Right.
And so, if you remember, it was two doctors versus one saying that, like, yes, you have PTSD, yes, it is career ending, or yes, it is job related, yes, it is career ending. The right step is to retire or stop working. one disagreed. And when they made that 0-7 ruling, they were playing on the part of the doctor, the one doctor who said, I can fix him from his PTSD if he just comes into my practice.
Right. The one doctor that the city sent me to.
Right. So
definitely isn't in the pocket.
Tell me that's not shady.
And so, like, again, 3 months prior, I was at a low point in my life with, almost killing myself. And, here I am getting denied a pension and ultimately having to go through, at that point, we had to make a decision to go through the appeal process. But, like, it was just another step. It was just this another hurdle to try to, like, prove that I, like, had PTSD. It felt like, and it was very frustrating because, again, like, I'm not scamming people. I'm not trying to. These experiences that we have gone through are real.
And it's easier to say that you don't have it because it's not a visual injury.
Right. It's not like a back injury or any injury.
Right.
It's in your head, and so it was very frustrating. But ultimately, we decided to go through with the appeal, and that entails a lot. But basically, we do a deposition and all this stuff, and it comes down to the day before our court hearing, and the city reaches out and wants to settle, and we ended up settling. It's one of the few things that I really regret about this whole process is that I just at the end said, fuck it, I'm done. Ultimately, what I believe led to the decision, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but the opposition to my testimony was going to be from a person that was
claimed to be
well aware of my situation hours after it happened, had checked in and helped me get the help I need when I needed it. And they were going to testify against me that, no, this call was not bad. And ultimately, I don't think I could have handled that. I have my own feelings towards that whole situation that are hard to move past. But I don't think I could have handled that in court, to hear somebody tell me that I look me in the eyes and tell me that I'm not dealing with the stuff that I say I am. And so we settled. And so what that kind of looks like is basically was to cover the cost of my medical care.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is they take an average of your cost from the past 2 years and then exponentially carry it out over 30 years until you're at retirement age. And then that's your lump sum of money. But they take like half of it away because they want you to invest it.
Or because they just don't want to give you the money.
Yeah. And so, we kind of felt like that was a kick in the dick because we didn't even get enough money to cover like medical expenses. And again, I'm not asking for things to change, but it's just.
I don't think it's about the money.
No, it isn't. It's just about like helping people.
And for you, like in the very beginning, you didn't really want to go through this whole retirement process because I think you sensed that it was going to be really hard.
Well, like I knew ahead of time that like the guy that went before me thought he had it hard. Well, I knew they were going to make it harder on me.
In the city, I think they learned their lesson.
Correct. And we were told that.
Yeah. So it's not about like that we didn't get insurance coverage for our family. It's not about that we didn't get like a certain amount of money to cover your therapy and your medications until you're able to get Medicare. It's about that there was blatant disrespect and dishonor for what now I can say this, but Matt cannot. There's blatant disrespect and dishonor for what this department claims to uphold a standard for taking care of individuals like Matt with PTSD. And
compassion, professionalism, integrity.
They didn't follow through. And it is shown time and time again through the ways that they rescheduled hearings or made you see another doctor or the things like
Yeah, we
they
didn't
would
even
say
talk about
one.
the fact that we went to Orlando and they tried to screw us over by saying I needed to come back for court. Like, there's just so many things that happen.
Right. And all of that is to say that no there was no sympathy from an organization who is sympathetic for every single person in their community besides their own, except when their own are not making it hard for them. And Matt was asking for money, asking for help. And that really would put the city in
The department.
or the city in a position where they would have to pay someone for not working because the department didn't do the things that they should have to take care of them in the beginning. I'm going to stop there, but I'll let you continue. If you can't tell, I didn't sign an NDA.
I did. I'll just say this. Yes, I want change within the way that we deal with things like that. And not just for my fire department, but for people that we treat or that serve its citizens, military, first responders, nurses, and doctors. Like, the fact that we treat people like this is just absolutely insane. I don't know. I think that's enough with that.
Yeah, so let's move past.
Yeah. The second part of this, like I said, that's the trauma. The second part of this is the things that help me get to where I'm at today. To have some level of clarity, and the things that I found to be helpful. And again, before we go through this, we know we're not going to make everybody happy. There are going to be some people pissed off, and we're going to try to avoid that the best that we can. We have disappointed people in the past. It'll probably happen again. I've disappointed my parents. I'm sure other people out there have disappointed their parents. I'm blessed to have a great family, great parents, great in-laws, great brothers and sisters that have been there to help us through this. And so, I know not everybody's blessed to have that, but I truly am. And I say it all the time. Like, I would not have gotten through this if it wasn't for the people that are in my corner. And again, like I said, that involves Tayler being the rock that helped me get through this. But I would say besides all of those things, the first thing that I want to talk about is finding a person that you trust illicitly. And I'm not saying explicitly. I didn't graduate college. For me, that was therapy. And I am really lucky that I got matched up with a therapist that I trust with literally my life. Doesn't mean I agree with everything they do on a daily basis. Doesn't mean I agree with everything that they tell me. But I had somebody there that was there to challenge me, to help me grow, and to be a person that was in my corner. And I'm not saying you have to go to therapy every day, every week, whatever, but having that person that you can talk through stuff and have that confidence with, and maybe it's a friend, but for me, it was somebody that like had professional experience and could help me because I knew all this stuff, right? Like I had lived the experiences, but I needed that professional help of being like, hey, this is why you're doing this, and this is why things are going this way. And so
somebody who can normalize it.
Yeah. And that was huge for me. And my therapist has been a very integral part of our lives for the past 6 years. And we are very lucky to have her in our life. Next, I would say, I talked about the not drinking thing and limiting my drinking. But 5 months ago, I decided to go completely sober from alcohol. And that has been huge for me. When I first started like the trying to control alcohol thing, I didn't want to give it up because I didn't want it to have this hold over me. I didn't want to admit that like alcohol was this problem for me that I couldn't overcome. I wanted to be able to control it and prove that I had control over it. And I would do good at that, but there would be times that I would mess up. And the next morning, they just started to become harder. And realizing that that's where a lot of my depression and suicidal thoughts started was right off in the morning, just being in that bad mood. I would say stopping drinking has been amazing for me. And I'm not saying that it has to work for you, and maybe it's not alcohol, maybe you have another vice, but um, not relying on that shit, it has been very freeing in a lot of ways. Um, Another thing that I, would say has been important to me is reevaluating my life in a couple standpoints, but mostly from the standpoint of like what is important and who is important in my life. I talk about it all the time, but when we first had our firstborn, I was a bad dad. I had episodes where I was angry, and he saw outbursts at a young age of me, and it was very hard for me to deal with. And I knew I was a bad dad. I knew I wasn't being the best I could be, and I struggled with that. And luckily, I kind of had this realization that like my family is the most important thing to me. Watching my two boys grow up is the most important thing to me. Watching my wife be successful and allow her to do what she wants to do and be who she wants to be, and raising this family together is important to me. And so, it's those things like, I'm like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I have such a better relationship with our second than I did with our first at this age, just because I'm a more caring and understanding and I don't know.
Yeah, and that's like where, like you mentioned earlier, that like the past 6 months or so have been just like exponentially brighter than like the past 6 years. And that's the main thing that like I can point out is that you are like, I'm not going to say that you're his favorite because I think I am, but the way that he has like this bond with you, and he has this hold on you, like where you are distracted with something else, but you like stop what you're doing and come and say goodnight to him, or like stop what you're doing and like let him give you like a slobbery kiss, which you didn't really see.
Right.
You didn't see
Right.
those things with our first. And so it's like a cloud has been moved from you. So
Yeah.
that's great to see.
I appreciate it. And, to go along with that, and we talked about it a little before, but like choosing the circle that you choose to be around, and cutting. And I'm not saying toxic people, right? Like I didn't just cut toxic people out of my life. I just having a group of people that are on the same page and want the same thing for you.
And I think
is important.
And being intentional about like what we choose
Right.
to do with our free time. Like, yes,
Right.
we're parents of young kids. And so like that could be one thing, but also like it's not in our best interest to like stay out late and drink with friends, or
Right.
go out and like do certain things, because it doesn't serve us, one. And like we know that like it's, not the best scenario to be around.
Right.
And so for this like season of life, like we're choosing, it's not that we don't ever do those things.
No.
We don't ever hang out with our friends and family,
but we have chosen to be more intentional about
Mhm.
just being family oriented.
Mhm.
And so I don't know, it's been good. And before I have one more. For me, I grew up Presbyterian, went to church on Sundays, did bells and choir on Wednesdays. Grew up religious in a religious household, and there was a time there that, after Carrie's call and my diagnosis and everything, where my faith just, I didn't lose it. It just took a different direction. Taylor's in the praise band at church and goes every Sunday and sings, and it, for me, I turned my relationship inward. I wanted to build a closer personal relationship with God, because I know the Bibles, I know the stories, like I know all that stuff, but I didn't have this deep connection I felt with God. And so I just started praying. And I had prayed before, but like I started praying about things relevant in my life that I wanted help with. I wanted to be a better dad. I wanted to be a better husband. I wanted to have more patience and love. I wanted, you know, to remain calm. I've prayed for things like help me get up in the morning, help me wake up to a fucking alarm.
We're still waiting on those
yeah, it
blessings to
doesn't
be
happen.
given.
But things like that. And I saw this shift where like I started believing more in God and that God would provide it. And so I went through this hard time and I had a lot of questions for him. Like, why was this happening to me? And I know these tragedies were happening to other families, but like, why did I have to go through them? And or why did I have to be a part of it and see this death? And then when it became to the court case, it was why all these hurdles? Why can't this be easy? Why can't people just know the goodness of my heart or whatever you have for me? Why are you putting me through this? And I don't have those answers, but I know this. I have grown closer with him, and that has made me a better person. It's made me a better dad. It has made me a better husband. I hope it makes me a better employee for my dad. I hope it makes me a better son for my parents and sibling for all of my brothers and sisters. Um, but I am very thankful that like I have gone through that and I am still here. And for that I am eternally thankful. So I don't know. Do you have anything that you think is relevant to what helped us get through this stuff?
I don't think I have anything else to add, but just like bringing back up that the more that like we've seen, the more that we share about these things, like whether it was, I mean, it's not about this, but like whether it was like our infertility
Right.
or like your struggles with depression or um
Just making connections with different
right,
people
like it
about the
just kind of,
trauma that we go through.
yeah, like it kind of just opens the door, and maybe not even trauma, but like you and my sister have found something similar in like the You Matter sweatshirt,
Right.
like those little things, like it will help you connect with others if you are just sharing a little part of your
Right.
story and making yourself vulnerable. Because while it is scary and you never know like how people are going to respond, and they're not going to respond in the way that you want them to, but if you can just give one person one more day, then that's worth it, I think.
Yeah. To piggyback off of that and to wrap this up, we're at an hour. This is the shortest we've gone, and I think the
Yeah.
best we've gone. So, I don't know what this is going to look like in the future. We've shared our hopes and dreams with what we think we can do and how we can help people, but it's going to rely on you to get this out there, to share it, and to come forward. And I just want to say, first off, if you do, thank you. Sharing trauma is hard, and we want to, like I said, provide that space that you feel comfortable doing it. My background with trauma is first responder related. It doesn't have to be that. It can be anything from any aspect of life. If you have a story that you want to share that you think can impact somebody, we'd love to hear it. So, um, with that being said, I always kind of end things the same way. If you got anything else, all right. Well, you are enough, and carry on.